Welcome to my channel. This time I will build two sinking fly lines that are intended for distance casting. One fly line will be used when fishing for rainbow trout and the other when fishing for sea trout. Both fly lines are built on Cortland 444, Sink 6, Class 8. This is without a doubt one of the best sinking lines on the market if you want to be able to fish long distances with a fly. Yes, I know that the Cortland 444 is not really intended for saltwater, but there is no problem if you wash it with lukewarm water when you get home from fishing. I start with the fly line that will be used while fishing for rainbow trout. I measure out 11.5 meters and cut the fly line. Actually, the total head is no longer than 9.6 meters on a Cortland 444, but I also keep a piece of the running line as a back taper, partly to get a little more weight on the fly line and partly because it is a little easier to reach a longer distance with a longer head. Now it is time to cut the fly line that will be used during sea trout fishing. This fly line should be a little shorter than the first fly line because it is often quite windy at sea, and then it can be difficult to keep a long fly line in the air. I decide to cut the fly line at 10.5 meters. Time to weigh what's left of both fly lines. I'll start with the sea trout fly line. 16.9 grams was perhaps a little lighter than I had hoped for, but works okay with a Class 7 fly rod. The fly line for rainbow trout weighs 19.2 grams. This is a good weight when it comes to long casts. For the fly line that will be used for sea trout, I will use a coated running line from Vision. The running line is called Ace, and the thickness is 0.027 inch. A fairly thin running line, in other words. I peel off about 3 centimeters of the coating on the running line at the end that will be joined to the fly line. Then I do the same thing on both fly lines. The easiest way to get the coating off is to make a tool knot on a nylon line, pull it tight in the coating, and pull the nylon line towards the end of the coated line. Time to connect the fly lines to the running lines. Since I use the same method on both fly lines, I'll only show one. The fly line that will be used for fishing for rainbow trout will not have a coated running line. This fly line will have a flat nylon shooting line called Rio Slick Shooter. This shooting line gives longer casts because the friction is less. The disadvantage is that this shooting line only works during the summer months and not when it is windy. Joining the fly line and the shooting line is quite easy. The first thing I do is tie a knot on the fly line around the shooting line. Then I do the same with the shooting line. When this is done, I tighten both knots carefully. Then I pull the fly line and the shooting line so that the knots are right next to each other. I tighten both knots and cut off the end so that about half a centimeter of them remains. Once the knots are tightened, I'll apply some superglue. Once the superglue has dried, I wrap tying thread around the fly line and the shooting line, covering the half-centimeter ends of the knots. When I'm done with the thread, I add a few drops of superglue. When the superglue is dried, I add some rubber glue for protection. Now the joint is complete. I just need to wait until the rubber glue is dried. Then the fly line is completely finished, except for attaching the leader. Now it's time to test both fly lines. I'll start with the fly line that will be used when fishing for sea trout. This is the fly line that weighs 16.9 grams and has a coated running line. I can cast 33 to 34 meters with this fly line, but the presentation of the fly is not as good as it should be. I simply have to take it to the sea and test it when we fish for sea trout later this fall. Now it's time to test the fly line, which weighs 19.2 grams and has a flat nylon shooting line. This fly line pulls much better. You can feel it right away. Unbelievable! This cast reached 42 meters. However, I can say that the long cast did not have a good presentation of the fly. So, when fishing, it would not have been a good cast. This is the fly rod I used during the test. It is a CTS Affinity X, 9.6 foot, Class 7. This was the first fly rod blanks from CTS that I bought 17 years ago. Since then, I have built 6 more CTS fly rods. In my opinion, the CTS Affinity X is still a top-class rod in terms of power and sensitivity. Affinity X is primarily characterized by a lot of power and a very nice sensitive rod tip. You always have excellent contact with a fly line when using a CTS Affinity X fly rod.